In the first half of the 20th century, the term cool drinks shop was commonly used for a small corner shop which sold lemonade and other aerated flavoured waters, as well as small goods and other items like newspapers, postcards, matches, etc. Via the German settlers in South Australia, the term delicatessen was also in use, although originally usually referring to an establishment which sold fine foods. Gradually, though, the use of the term cool drinks shop faded away mid-century to be replaced by the name delicatessen. Each shop was normally run by a family as an independent unit. Due to economic and social changes in the 1980s, the delicatessens, which at one time were located on street corners throughout the suburbs of Adelaide, slowly found the cost of doing business too steep, and they began closing. Women who had stayed home to look after children during the 1950s and 60s baby boom and provided a steady revenue source began to become working women, travelling away from their home suburbs and utilising shopping centres as cheaper and more convenient. The old corner shops most commonly were their deli, fruit and vegetable shop, drapers, butcher and hairdresser became a memory. Families generally had less children from the 1970s onwards, which meant less young customers buying lollies and comics after school and on the weekends. Campaigns to make smokers quit cut into the profits made from selling cigarettes. By the end of the 1990s, most delicatessens had closed their doors. They were replaced in the city and along main roads by chains of convenience stores, which filled a similar niche, often attached to petrol stations. Although the term cool drinks shop was still being used in government documents as late as 2006, it was not in general usage. Perhaps because of the aura of mischief which clung to them, particularly in the interwar years of the 1910s to the 1930s. Here follow a few tales from Adelaide's cool drinks shops. The difference between a hotel and a cool drinks shop was that the latter did not sell alcoholic liquor, sometimes referred to covertly as after 6. Well, in theory at least. There were a few occasions that rule was upset. In October 1920, Frederick Stewart was running a cool drinks shop at 38 Grote Street when 7 police arrived to make a search of the premises. The constabulary located 2 bottles of beer in a cupboard under the stairs. "I give you my word there is no more beer on the premises. If I had any more I would tell you," vowed Stewart. Less suspicious men would have assumed they were Stewart's personal drinks and left without further ado. These men were suspicious, as Stewart had been caught sly-grogging twice before. Their search uncovered a further 32 bottles hidden in a cellarette, plus another 14 bottles of liquor and some empties, and 6 men in a room gambling at cards. As it was his third offence, Stewart got sent to jail for 6 months. On the 9th of September 1922, police found a large number of liquor bottles at Catherine Harris's cool drinks shop at 252 Hindley Street. When the police were leaving with the evidence they had collected, James Ware, who boarded at the premises, shouted to them, "Why in the bloody hell don't you take the bloody shop with you?" The charges were dismissed in court. While cool drink shops were known for being fronts for sly grog sales, they were more notorious as a plausible cover for brothels, following the Suppression of Brothels Act of 1907, especially those located in the area around Sturt Street, in the southwestern corner of Adelaide. Police visited a cool drinks shop at 277 King William Street on the 20th of August 1915. Upon entry they found the occupier, a known prostitute named Dora Richards, in bed. With her was a 13-year-old girl, who when asked to get out of bed was revealed to be fully dressed. She claimed she was just visiting Mrs. Kelso, referring to Dora Richards. Her mother knew she was there, she added. Asked if her mother knew how Dora made her money, the girl said even she didn't know what Dora did. Detective Matten asked if she could form an idea of what she did. "You were lying on the bed beside a woman who has a black eye, and there are wine bottles and glasses on the table in the room." The girl said she hadn't noticed the black eye. Subsequent investigation revealed the girl's mother did not know her daughter had gone to see Richards, and that she had warned Richards not to allow her daughter to go there. The same girl had been seen by police with another girl and 2 soldiers, sneaking down a lane and attempting to obtain entry into an empty building one night in April 1915. The girl was sent to a reformatory until she turned 18. Richards was arrested for having insufficient lawful means of support. In court, Matten said he knew Dora had been a prostitute for many years, and would often stand at the doorway of the cool drink shop, saying good night to passing men as an invitation. She claimed she sold cool drinks, but although there were a few bottles of drink, there were no glasses in the shop. Dora was ordered to prison for 2 months. In 1917, it was alleged that a pretty young Frenchwoman of delicate appearance, who ran a cool drinks shop at 145 Pulteney Street, was also selling more than soft drinks and cigarettes. Paulette Caron had come to public attention a few years earlier, in December 1914. The woman was then aged 22. She had come to Australia from France in 1912. At about 2:20 p.m. on Saturday the 12th of December, a police constable named Patrick Walsh heard a gunshot and saw a figure lying by a tree near Holland Avenue in the East Park lands. Paulette was found with a bullet wound in her left breast, but she denied anything was wrong. The policeman checked a handbag next to her and found an automatic revolver with 5 live cartridges in the magazine. She was helped to hospital and remained there for some days. On Tuesday she was charged with attempted suicide. Paulette denied the accusation, saying she had 2 handbags, one for her money and the other in which she kept the gun, which had been given to her by her family when she left France. She had taken the wrong bag, and when handling the gun it had gone off accidentally. Catherine Berger said she had known Paulette for 2 years, at Broken Hill and in Adelaide. She had not been able to speak English when she first arrived in Australia, and worked as a milliner and a dressmaker. Catherine had been living in a boarding house at 6 Somerset Terrace, off California Street, with a 33-year-old German man named Franz Hosel. Hosel was an unemployed miner who had been drinking when he read about the sinking of 3 German cruisers in a World War I battle, and had become enraged by the British naval victory, and threatened to shoot everybody, so she left on the 10th of December, fearing he might harm her. She returned at 8:30 a.m. on the following day, and found him on the bed, having shot himself in the head. Catherine had stayed the night with Paulette at 2 Kent Street, who she observed to be distressed by the actions of Hosel on the morning of the 12th. At a hearing she was discharged into the care of her friend who had offered to look after her. From the 2nd to the 6th of January 1917, police kept the cool drink shop under observation from a position across the street at the gate of a church between 8:30 to 11 p.m. On those 5 nights a total of 42 men visited the shop, the door of which the police spies could see the feet of the men under the curtain, noticing they would be in the shop for a minute or two, and then they would go into a small room off the side where they would be for 5 to 10 minutes before leaving the premises. A newly recruited constable, the aptly named 21-year-old George Virgin, was sent into the store to buy some cigarettes and see if Paulette solicited him. He purchased the tobacco, and she asked if he wanted anything else. When he asked what else did she have, she said cool drinks, then invited him into the other room. George asked how much he charged, and she replied 7 shillings and 6pence. Making the excuse that he lacked the money, he left. Another policeman in plain clothes, 23-year-old Lawrence Mann, followed the same course, but when he asked what else was on offer, Paulette pointed at herself and said, "Me." At 10:15 p.m. on the 6th of January, 2 policemen entered the shop and spoke to Paulette, who identified herself as the owner of the shop. In the shop they found only a few bottles of soft drinks and a couple of packets of cigarettes. In the room next to the shop was a bed, a chair, an ice chest, and a small table. Aside from the evidence of the 2 young constables, the magistrate said the case was flimsy, and it could be construed that Paulette was simply stricken with passion for the 2 young men. The case was dismissed, but the police didn't let it lie. They appealed, and in April the Chief Justice found Paulette had a case to answer for keeping a disorderly house, but by this time she had departed to Sydney, leaving only the Sydney GPO as a forwarding address. In her absence she was found guilty and fined £17. History does not record if Paulette ever returned to Adelaide to pay the fine or not. In fact, she vanishes, probably behind a new name from this point. Sometimes the cool drinks shop just happened to incidentally be the site of an event. On the 21st of April 1921, the Lone Hand Cool Drinks and Confectionery shop at 158 Rundle Street was the site. It was approximately 3:30 p.m. Arthur Bernard Craig, 35, a clerk at the Port Pirie smelters, and his 23-year-old wife Dorothy had both ordered a lemon squash. Although he had bumped into a table and knocked over some chairs on the way in, he didn't seem otherwise peculiar. Craig and his wife had been sitting talking earnestly, their drinks half consumed, when all of a sudden he stood up and pulled a handgun from his pocket and shot his wife twice in the shoulder across the blackwood table. With a loud scream she fell from her seat to the floor. Craig pointed the weapon at his own head and fired again. He too fell down, blood flowing freely from the wound. Both were still conscious, however. One of the two waitresses, both 17 years of age, Vera Warman, had been behind the counter. She ran out to alert police. The other, Doris Church, had been glancing out into the street. Both women saw Craig shoot his wife, and then himself in the forehead over the right eye. It was all over in a matter of seconds. The proprietress, Pauline Heath, who had been at the back of the shop, ran to the door to keep a crowd attracted by the sounds of gunfire from entering. Detectives Allchurch and Trestrail happened to be passing and rushed over to join Constable Stevens. Two more plainclothes men quickly were on the scene. Dorothy sat up, being tended to by Mrs. Heath, but said she couldn't feel her legs, and asked to be taken to hospital. She also informed them that they were a married couple. Mrs. Heath recognised the woman as a regular customer. "He was a beast to shoot me," Dorothy remarked. "One bullet had just missed her right lung, while another passed below her heart." When asked why he had done it, Craig muttered, "Booze, booze." Then he said he had a wife and child whom he had not seen for 12 months. Craig had taken a week's leave from the smelters, where he had worked for 3 years, and come to the city to see his wife, who had left him some months before. At Port Pirie and at the hotel where he stayed, his behaviour had been normal, and he was thought of as an inoffensive man. Craig had gone to the Grand Central Hotel on the corner of Pulteney Street, where Dorothy had worked as a waitress for 2 months, and asked her to walk with him to North Terrace. Wary, due to threats he had made in the past, she refused, but acquiesced to accompany him across the road to the cool drink shop. The couple had married in Sydney in 1916, and were the parents of a 4-year-old girl, also called Dorothy, who was in the care of friends at Glen Osmond, a suburb of Adelaide. He asked her to return to live with him, which she declined to do. That was when he drew the revolver and said, "We might as well finish it here." When the couple arrived at hospital, Craig asked if he was going to die, and said he knew nothing of the shooting, and remarked that he was still at his hotel. Craig underwent surgery, but was critical. He had lost a lot of blood, whereas Dorothy had not. She showed signs of improvement. Bernard Craig died in hospital on the evening of the 25th of April. Dorothy recovered and was discharged from hospital in early June of 1921. Doris Church, one of the waitresses who witnessed the affray, married in 1924 but died in 1925, aged only 21. A sensational case in March 1918 shone a brief spotlight on some of the characters floating about the fringes of Adelaide society at that time. A well-known newsagent and bookmaker named Hertel Alexander Williamson, aged 38, was charged with having indecently assaulted Violet Gwendolyn Kitchener Robinson, who at 16 was below the legal age of consent, set at 17. She claimed that Williamson had seduced her on multiple occasions between September 1915 and May 1917. Despite a long tale of encounters and payoffs, there was no evidence, and witnesses who denied the events had occurred as stated by Violet. In the end, Williamson was found not guilty, and it appears that revenge was the motive for the accusations. Violet's brother, David Hastings Robinson, had once worked for Williamson before getting into trouble for running illegal gambling games in 1914. David Robinson was sentenced to 3 months in jail in January 1915, and then died at the age of 20 of meningitis on the 4th of August in the same year. It appears Violet blamed Williamson for her brother's interest in gambling. It was during the cross-examination of Violet that interesting background information emerged. At the time, Violet was in the Redruth Reformatory, where she had been since June 1917, having given herself up when a warrant had been issued for her arrest. Asked how she knew about the warrant, she replied she had been told by a gentleman known as Mexican Jack. Asked if she knew him well, and had gone out at night with him in the city, she denied it. although she did concede she did go out frequently at night in Adelaide, often staying out until late. Violet admitted that she had stayed out all night with another girl named Doris Mendelssohn in May 1917, but denied knowing anything else about Doris, who had fled to Broken Hill and gotten married at age 15 to avoid being prosecuted by the women police as an uncontrollable child. She and Doris had met up with Mexican Jack, whose real name was Lawrence Leslie Lawson, and whose main skill was in picking pockets, at the Windsor Castle Hotel, and they had then gone and broken into an office to sleep in overnight. Mexican Jack and Doris had sex 3 times, but Violet denied anything had happened with her. The following night she and Doris slept at Cocky Reynolds' place in Sturt Street, which happened to be a brothel. Violet admitted they knew it was a house of ill fame. They spent the day in the Botanical Gardens, and by about 7 p.m. visited a cool drink shop at the corner of Sturt Street and Whitmore Square, kept by a 25-year-old man they knew as Corky. His real name was Thomas Connellan, and he was alleged to be a member of the King Hit mob, a street gang whose leader, it was said, was Mexican Jack. They gained their name from their preference of getting the first punch in during a fight. On October the 28th, 1914, Connellan had gotten into an argument with a barman named Arthur Williams at the Clarence Hotel in King William Street. During the disturbance, Connellan hit Williams in the face, causing him to fall. The injuries he received proved fatal, and he died in hospital on the 5th of November. Connellan claimed he had merely pushed the other man away to break up a fight. The jury believed him, and he was acquitted of manslaughter in January 1915. By 1917, Connellan was in trouble again, though. Firstly fined £2 for assaulting Henry Prest in June, and then on the 21st of August he punched his fiancée and mother of his child, 21-year-old Bertha Ellis, who co-owned a cool drink shop with him. Thomas and Bertha had known each other for 5 years and were to be married soon. Instead, following the court case over the assault on the 28th of August, just hours later he went to the shop, causing trouble, and when Bertha closed the shop and left, went to Bertha's home at 66 Whitmore Square, around 7:30 p.m. Connellan concealed himself in the park, then seeing Bertha with her mother returning from a shop, he rushed out and slashed Mrs. Ellis about the head and face with a large meat knife, causing severe wounds. The woman dropped to the road and Connellan attacked Bertha, gashing her face, head and hands terribly. As Bertha's brother Frederick raced out to help, Connellan ran the knife blade over his own throat, inflicting a deep cut. All 3 recovered, and Corky Connellan was sent to jail for 7 years with hard labour in November 1917. It appears Connellan was released early because he was in jail in Melbourne in January 1924, and then roaming about the next 6 months before he was arrested for vagrancy in Adelaide. Adelaide never really had gangs of the type which formed in Sydney and Melbourne, known as a push, which evolved into organised crime syndicates. The closest were the Rob Roy push, East End push, and Botanic Park push, all of which existed around 1903. They weren't known to carry guns or other weapons, relying on their fists in fights and more concerned with having a good, if rowdy, time. The most dangerous was the Botanic Park push, which was thought to have had as members the men who murdered Constable Hyde in 1909 while attempting a robbery. The King Hit mob coalesced around 1912 and mainly assaulted other young men who appeared to be from wealthier circumstances, sometimes having their straw hats broken over their own heads. It might have become a serious criminal organisation in time, but many of the members joined up for the army when World War I began, and many never returned home. Of those who remained, like Connellan and Mexican Jack, after several years of crimes and imprisonment, they faded away, like the cool drinks shops, into the dark corners of history.